Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sovereign Village Project. Welcome to Community Hour. Hello, Mary. Looks like you're first in there, claiming that first position in the comments. Good to see you. We are here in our house with a floor. Look at this. You don't realize how much a floor means until you've been living on particle boards for long enough. To have a floor is really making it feel like we live in a house almost.
It's been a big morale booster.
Every milestone is something. I'm really excited for running water.
Yeah,
that's a really fun one. We really are roughing it as we do this build. We are truly living in this house while we build it, and that has been a journey.
Quite an experience.
Today's topic is prepping, and boy, is that interesting. Trying to prep while moving and building a house and coming from a 400 square foot building. Basically, we were living in a tiny house before with no shed, no outdoor storage. So our ability to store food was really limited. So we basically, the last year during the beginning of the tyrannical lockdowns and all of that, most of our prepping was like what people in an apartment would have to do, really. I mean, we had stuff squirreled in I had stuff in my cars because we had so little room for canned food or anything like that. So to finally be starting work on a root cellar and getting an outbuilding on the site and getting this house close to finish means that we can really start to think about our prepping in a totally different way because we have a different space to work with and we're establishing homestead systems now. And what we want to talk about in this community hour, besides all the random rabbit trails that we'll definitely get on, what we want to talk about is prepping from a different perspective because we're really of the mindset that we are in collapse. For many right now around the globe, they are experiencing collapse in so many ways. Gabby's in charge of watching the dog and Holly's a troublemaker, so she's going to be coming in and out. So in my view, we are prepping in a time of economic collapse, supply chain collapse, food shortages. We can see all of this happening around us. The hyperinflation can no longer be denied. None of this is conspiracy theory. None of it is theory. We are in the midst of many segments of our society that are actively collapsing. And that's very much now on our mindset as these tyrannical mandates from the criminal gang that we call government has said that employers are going to basically have to start firing people if they don't get vaccinated. That means a lot of us are facing job loss. Gabby is potentially facing job loss. I'm potentially facing job loss. So that adds a whole nother dynamic to prepping as well. But to us, we really are on the verge of collapse here. We're seeing, our neighbors may also lose their ability to make a living. And so that's what potential collapse has never been more real than it is now, because a lot of people could lose access to jobs. They could potentially lose access to government benefits and all of that, because I'm sure that will be used as a bargaining chip to enforce compliance. So we're about to see people in a whole world of financial hurt. And what I'm witnessing in both the downtown core where I work in Nashville, Tennessee, and both there and in this rural area, what I'm seeing is the more things collapse on a broader scale, the more you see of the criminal element growing and of people who already had nothing and who probably already had drug problems and various problems that made them not very functional members of society. They're becoming more desperate as money becomes harder to come by. We've certainly seen overdoses skyrocket in this area. And most everybody talks as, anecdotally, like they've seen an increase in crime. And so I'm just making the case that we are in collapse. It just doesn't look quite as apocalyptic and as movie-like as many preppers seem to think about. So when we prep, it's from the perspective that we're in collapse, and that's a whole different ballgame. Reliance on Trust is in here. Good to see you too, man. This is going to be a great conversation, I can tell already. So we just want to talk about our prepping methods and where we're going with it, because we're really about to change up our entire system. I'll have some things to tell about like my ideas and Gabby's too, because we're still kind of trading ideas back and forth and determining what we're going to do. But I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on this. But we really want to specifically talk about moving from prepping to self-sufficiency. So, for example, a lot of people, and ourselves included, we prep food from the store. We prep beans and rice and grains and all of this stuff. But our goal is to, for the most part, to step outside of that system entirely. We don't want to be eating any food from storage, really. We don't want to be putting any of that in our bodies. We don't trust it. It's not grown safely or regeneratively. It's grown destructively to humans and the environment. We don't want to take part in that system anymore. And so given that collapse looks a lot more real than some distant scenario, we really want to think about our diets in collapse. We don't want to just not starve to death. We want to be healthy and be putting good nutritive food into our body, because we're going to need health in collapse. We're not going to necessarily have access to healthcare. We're not going to be able to transport ourselves so easily to healthcare. So it's important we be healthy, strong people who have fresh minds, from good eating and good lifestyles. Every part of our bodies and lifestyle that we can improve, it's going to make us more likely to survive and thrive in this collapse. So we're right now, the position we're at is we step up food production as quickly as we possibly can on this property, and we are moving fast. We have a lot of crops in the ground just in the past couple of weeks, but it's going to be a long time before we have not only enough food for ourselves, but enough to sell. So what we've kind of talked about with our root cellar is going ahead and buy one rotating stock of canned goods, basically beans and things like that we know we're going to use in dishes. For the foreseeable future, we're going to use all these fresh vegetables and stuff we generate from the property.
Yeah.
We'll make chilies and soups, burritos, hashes, and beans can be put in everything. And you can buy them organically and stuff for a little bit of a markup. So we'll probably just go get a bunch of Kroger cartons of just canned beans, because I've also prepped in dried beans and they all just went to waste over time. There's so much work to soak them and all of that. For me, that's just maybe once our homestead system is more efficient up and running and we have a kitchen and everything, we could always be soaking beans or something. But I just found the workload was so intense, and yes, it was cheaper, but canned food is just, I actually use it, and then that means I actually rotate it out. Because if you're prepping, it's a lifestyle. You're not just prepping once. You're rotating food in and out, and ideally you're eating it, and it's just a part of your normal diet. That's what we're trying to achieve here, is where we're not really prepping separately from our normal lives. We're just getting a little bit more of the food we use and rotating it really efficiently and having an efficient system design. Which that's probably going to fall on Gabby, is designing that. But let's come back to that, because you can kind of speak on that a little bit. But I want to say kind of more where we're going in the long term is we want to phase out those canned goods and phase out any store food except for maybe grains. But even though we're going to be buying grains from local farmers, so the grains will have to figure out their own storage method, probably 5-gallon buckets that are sealed, maybe Mylar bags, and we'll rotate those in and out, because Gabby does a lot of baking, and baking may be a part of our farm business as well. So that'll be a major part of our prepping. We'll be always having grains, which can also be used to feed our animals. And then everything else would be canned ourselves. Every time we see jars at the store, every time I'm at the store, I buy more jars. We just stock jars, and we're going to start stocking lids and rings too. We already saw shortages of those. So then we can really be rotating preserved food that's still going to last a couple of years. In a root cellar properly stored and properly canned, I remember as a kid, we ate canned food that was 4 and 5 years old in jars, and it was fine. And that was kind of dependent on what kind of food was in it. Meat, you're a little more cautious of. But like canned vegetables and stuff, you don't need to be quite so careful, especially if you're cooking everything, and you're just mindful of it and you know how to watch for botulism or anything like that. But so we're going to be moving from a store-bought prepping system into one that is actually just a part of the farm system and preservation, but we're just going to be striving to stay really far ahead of our needs. So because we can't get ahead of our needs right now, because we're trying to build a house and establish a farm and build the infrastructure and greenhouses and sheds, it's going to take us a year or two to really get that running. So we do want to have food on site for now. So we are going to prep more traditionally right now. And that's what we've got food and even storage units right now just because of this move. But basically just canned goods. Like I've just found that for me, the dried beans didn't work. A lot of the rice went to waste, but rice is really good because it's so cheap. Like you spend $100 on rice and you've got enough to like feasibly last you years, and you can feed rice to animals. So we probably will be bringing rice too. But I just found like a lot of the traditional prepper foods I just didn't use, and I had trouble in the last couple of years rotating them out. So I would love to hear everyone else's thoughts on it, because a lot of us have been prepping for a few years now, and I've really seen that a lot of things I thought initially would work do not work with a real practical lifestyle. We're all so busy, and I just experienced so much food waste. I mean, I composted everything, so it didn't go to waste, but that's a very expensive compost.
Yeah. Mary brings up a good point, because maybe there are other ways of preserving food aside from canning that's not so reliant on having to have like a specific tool or. Yeah,
because also we can't manufacture mason jars ourselves, and we can't manufacture new rings and lids, and the jars will last about forever, but the rings and lids will not. And so it's still reliant on a grid to some degree, but it's easy enough to stock, for a few years ahead. But yes, that's absolutely on my list of things to really focus on learning. Smoking of meats and drying meats, making jerkies, making pemmikins. There's a lot of ways to preserve meats.
dried fruits and such.
Yep, and then a root cellar system also, you can start incorporating cheeses and stuff, which is, there's a reason we eat all this fermented dairy product, which is because in the day they didn't have refrigerators. So if you had access to dairy, you could then turn that into a fermented product that would just improve its flavor over time and it wouldn't go rotten. It was like a controlled rot. Almost, that's really why we have all these fermented foods. So fermented foods, including cheeses and things like that, but also the fermented foods you think of more of like sauerkrauts, things like that. Those are great preservation methods. Of course, when it comes to fruits, you're doing jams and jellies. We're going to do a lot of juices as well because we're just addicted to beverages. We love to drink juices and things. So when we get more perennial fruit production, we'll be doing that. So there's a whole world of preservation out there outside of canning. So I'm glad you brought that up because we're just really starting to explore all these different areas. We have a neighbor who's a master at smoking and preserving meat. So that's going to be helpful to learn from him. And of course, there's just a lot of fruits and vegetables, or a lot of vegetables, especially in squashes and things, will store in a root cellar all year round. You can take a winter squash, put it on the kitchen counter, and eat it 3 or 4 months later. Same with potatoes, same with onions. So there's a lot of these root crops we're going to grow that we'll grow them right up to the end of the season and grow them even in a greenhouse and stuff in high tunnels. Grow them right up to the end of the season and store them, and they should carry all the way through spring. So that's kind of a preservation method as well. It's just specifically growing things to be preserved. So the root cellar will be really helpful in that. Squashes, potatoes, turnips, and there are some you can actually leave in the ground. I left my turnips in the ground really late in the last year. I think it was December and January. We were still eating turnips, and they probably would have lasted longer.
Carrots,
I believe carrots too. So a lot of root vegetables, you can just grow them into fall, and they just stay in the soil, and the soil preserves them for you. So root vegetables really are, I think, the staple of survival in the winter because there's also no processing. You're just picking it, sticking it in a root cellar or something similar, a cool space. And then really, if you think about what animals, the way they traditionally function on farm, like chickens and stuff, you could actually see animals as a preservation method, a method of preserving food into the lean times. Traditionally, people ate more meat in the winter because your chickens or your sheep or your cows or whatever, they're getting fattened up on the spring growth and the summer growth of your pastures and of your forests and whatever they're grazing on. They're eating all that. Then times get hard for them in the winter when they get hard for you. And then you consume them. They still are going to live a while. So traditionally, it was probably not necessarily the most humane way, but the animals were probably getting pretty hungry in the winter when they decided to slaughter them. Yeah. That's just me speculating. So many great comments. You're talking about all the mandate stuff. I made my video, of course, yesterday or the day before about what our course of action is going to be. We're going to have the meeting this week in our community with everyone who's concerned about this, and we're going to decide on a course of action that's essentially going to probably be going to the county commissioners and saying, you will not enforce federal mandates that infringe on any of our constitutional rights, period. And I think the county will do it. They are a Second Amendment sanctuary already, so they've already broken with the federal government, so there's already precedent for it. And I think we can get some folks there who are going to support us and agree with us and really want to just prevent any enforcement of these mandates in the state. Now, the governor of the state, despite the fact that he's a despicable rhino NWO stooge, he knows his base, and so he has said that he's not going to enforce the mandates either. Essentially, he's in a feud, but we just want to keep adding layers of protection between us and the federal government. If we can have the state in opposition and we can have our county in opposition and the local municipalities and all of that, just the more we can make it difficult for them to operate in our area, the better. The safer we are from that kind of totalitarianism. Mary started a bartering system with people. Instead of accepting cash, I also accept goods for my colloidal silver and elderberry syrup. That is so awesome. Bartering is going to become probably our only option eventually, the way things are going. Like I see cash, like where I work in downtown, they're doing a lot of the sustainable development type new mixed use developments that are both residential, high rise, pod housing, as well as entertainment districts and all that. And they're these self-contained like miniature cities are crazy. And there's one next to Broadway that's recently been built on 5th Avenue. And I've been spending some time in there to see what's going on. And it definitely feels like a dystopian dome city of just like, it looks like Logan's Run in there.
Where is it at?
Downtown Nashville. But there's no cash. None of the businesses accept cash. I don't think the developer or the management company allows them to. So they are all digital currency only. None of them take cash. So it's basically a small town, self-contained town that does not accept cash. And so you can see them phasing out cash. The Federal Reserve is using coronavirus as an excuse and getting rid of it. So we're all going to have to figure out bartering really fast, as well as our other options. Cryptocurrency makes a lot of people nervous. The blockchain is a little creepy. I think it's a tool that can be misused or used well. I think but it may be a survival tactic we do need to use to exchange outside of the system, because there are ways to exchange cryptocurrencies like Monero and Pirate Chain that appear to be really anonymous, because essentially you just buy a laptop on Craigslist that doesn't have your name attached to it, and you could be trading cryptocurrency and stuff in a way that's far removed from on a public Wi-Fi network or something like that. Of course, that's all dependent on the grid. So another good option is like gold backs, which they're like almost like little dollar bills. Private companies make them, but they actually have gold inside of it, and then they're laminated. You could actually take that bill and burn it and capture the gold. So it's a real piece of gold. So it's got inherent value. And they're usually priced around, I think, like $3 or $4 a piece. So it's kind of a moderate. You could buy a cup of coffee with that. It's about the lowest and easiest method of exchange you could have in a kind of SHTF scenario, or just a scenario where there's no cash. But bartering is what it's probably going to be in the end. That will be our last means of doing business, because it's really hard for the government to restrict you trading a chicken coop with your neighbor for a bushel of apples. And we do a lot of bartering right here with my homestead design business. When I send a quote, I list the cash price, and then I list the things that I will be interested in also bartering. So I tell them I'll do cash, I'll do cryptocurrency, I'll do metals, but I'll also do, like, if they have timber on the land that I need, or if they have a piece of equipment I need to use. I have one client right now that I'm helping do a community design for that's talking about buying a mini excavator. And if he did, then I would say, well, I'll trade some of my consultation services for access to your mini excavator. So there's so much room for barter. We barter a lot with our neighbors.
I bartered. I'm doing a website I did a swiftwater rescue training with our volunteer fire department, and ended up working with the people who taught us to build them a website. And then I bartered part of my quote to get our department 2 slots for.
That's such a cool example, because she was bartering for website design service. So it's such a modern thing, but we're just going back to these old methods of bartering. And I think 2 members of our fire department are now already about to get that free training
next week, I think.
Yeah. So like bartering is fun. And also there's a different kind of bartering you do with your neighbors too, where you just try to outgive them. And that's actually that's not just, we didn't start that. Both places we've lived out here in Hickman County, our neighbors have outgiven us faster than we can give anything back to them. The neighbor across from us has been invaluable in helping us build this house. And the one at our last place, he brought us, I've told that story a few times about how he brought us meat when all of our animals got killed, and they've watched our house, and when we're gone, just they've done so much for us, and they give so freely. It's like bartering, but there's no record kept, and you're not negotiating for how little you have to trade. You're trying to give them more than they give you, and it's really a fun way to live. I guess that's the gift economy, but it's very real. And I think it's actually going to see an increase in that style of economy as things collapse, because what people are doing is looking around and seeing this collapse occurring, and they're like, I better be very valued by my neighbors. And that's our line of thinking. We want to make sure our neighbors are well fed, that they have abundant food, that they're healthy and happy. We don't want poverty-stricken, hungry neighbors around us. And so we want to give our seedlings and our gardening help and everything we can do as much as we can to our neighbors.
Yeah.
So it's partly altruistic, partly not.
If your neighbors aren't succeeding, then you aren't succeeding either. You aren't truly succeeding.
And I think we're also going back to an economy in these rural areas where our neighbors are our business partners. Especially if my theory is that transportation is going to become more difficult and more expensive in rural areas. I think they're going to restrict oil, like we saw with the supposed hack into the pipeline, cyber attack. And we've seen a lot of Mississippi River and Tennessee River traffic being shut down, with bridges and locks being shut down. I think it was the Wilson lock on the Tennessee River just got shut down. And then there was that problem on I-40 with the bridge near Memphis that shut down river traffic on the Mississippi. So it seems like commerce and transportation, as a part of this global totalitarian takeover, or not, just as a part of collapse, I don't know, but it seems that it's all being slowed down. And even if it doesn't happen, we know that it could. You can really see how quickly and how easily now they could shut off our access to oil. They did it with a simple supposed cyber attack. That basically somebody flipped a switch and suddenly our means of getting to work and our means of getting to the grocery store is threatened. So if we're not able to move around as cheaply or as easily as we were in the past, which already with inflation and gas prices, like that's already the case, the more our range is restricted, the more we're going to have to rely on neighbors and work with them. And to me, that's part of prepping too. All of that is part of prepping, is prepping your neighbors. Like you can talk all day about how it's not your business or it's not your job to make sure your neighbors are prepped, but it is. It is. Those are your allies or they're your enemies. It's one or the other. Garden Diaries. Oh, we got some great folks in here. She's catching us from England. I love England. I've only gone once. I did a tour there a couple years ago, and of course, like anywhere, it's got its problems. Oh yeah, trying to figure out how to drive them. I hadn't driven a manual transmission in years when I went to England, so everything's on the wrong side of the road. I'm trying to drive a manual transmission on roads that are meant for wagons, not cars, in the middle of London, and I definitely kept stalling out in the roundabouts and everything. But what a beautiful country England is. I love those places where things are so old.
Yeah.
Where the landscape, especially when you get into the country and everything's built of stone and regenerative materials, like that's kind of what we're building everything we build to look like as much as we can, is just connected with the earth and not a lot of synthetic materials. Home and Garden Diary says we need bicycles and Bics to repair punctures. Yes, bicycle. That's actually a prep I made the other day. That's another good point on the prepping. I just went out and bought a bike when the oil pipeline stuff happened. I drove like an hour to just find I found a cheap, basic, kind of mountain bike, really basic bike. Bought it. That's an invaluable prep to have, because that is still moving you down the road a whole lot faster than walking. And unlike a horse, you don't have to feed it. Mary says, it's getting wild, y'all. Number one commodity as we enter this phase is #no fear. I've been prepping since 2013, and I'm kind of ready to get on. 2013, wow, you got, the only person I know that's got you beat is my mom. She started prepping for Y2K. And then she kind of slacked off, but after that it didn't pan out. But she's always had a huge pantry, so I did learn a lot from her. Yeah. But 2013, that's a long time. I wish I had started in 2013. Reliance says, Trust says, let's try to look at all the positives. This is all moving excruciatingly slow. We are being given massive warnings, and in my experience, I'm seeing many, many unlikely and unexpected people waking. What a great thought there. I think you're absolutely right. This has moved so much more slow than I thought. I thought in January of 2019 or 2020, in January, before the public was even aware of what was going on, I thought that there would be roadblocks and that we would be in a shooting war by like spring. I thought that's how fast it was going to move. I thought they would just clamp down immediately with the fear. And I think maybe they were pushing as fast as they could, because you could see them setting up the infrastructure for the quarantine camps and the roadblocks and all these other totalitarian markers. You could see them going for it, but I think they were already hitting a point where people were pushing back. I know here in Tennessee, we were pushing back very hard, and open carry was becoming very common at protests, and I actually engaged in open carry for protests because I think we were all trying to send the message like, you need to slow this down, like, because we all know what they're doing. We know they're going to try to take every freedom we have, but the message there was like, hey, slow down. Those of us who are paying attention need more time, so we don't want to have to move fast to stop everything from progressing. But I feel like I'm talking code. But
now we have time.
And the time is such a blessing. It's really giving us time to get our homestead built. And I would just really encourage everybody. We are running ourselves into the ground, and it's really hard. It's hard mentally. It's hard physically. My back hurts so much. We don't sleep. I'm getting home. We got home at 5 a.m. last night. I was working 12 hours straight in Nashville, playing 4 shows back to back, 3 4-hour shows back to back. And Gabby was doing filming for some video projects for that. So we are just working ourselves into the ground, because now is the time to move, build homesteads, build community, build communications networks, prep. It's getting exponentially harder to do this. Rural land is getting harder to get. Food is getting more expensive. Any prepping or homesteading, and supply chains are collapsing. So anything you're trying to do is going to get harder and harder, more expensive. It's going to get harder for you to find the work and to acquire the capital to do this. That's when we're going into a Great Depression. That means everything's going to be harder to do, harder to acquire. So it's going to get exponentially more difficult to prep until we will really just be in survival mode and we'll be using our preps. That's, I think, what's really going to happen here. So for most of us, unless somebody's just truly already self-sufficient and already prepped and really got a good regenerative system going. And that's why we invest so little time into actually prepping like other people do as far as foods and stuff like that. We just want to have enough canned goods to really get us through, but we're spending all of our money, our time, and our energy building our greenhouses, building our farm systems, getting our water catchment going, getting our energy systems going. Like looking at the pace of things, I think other than your basic preps, your focus should not be stockpiling 10 years of food unless you have the financial means to do that. But if you don't, if you're like us where you haven't really prioritized your money, I think it's a lot wiser to invest in your ability to indefinitely produce food rather than just buy tons and tons of food if you have to choose. So for us, we just try to pick a reasonable amount. And a lot of that is seasonal, like, you know, working with a crazy thin budget in the middle of a house build when we were and having to move in between places that were not finished. We had to, I really just tried to think of how much food it would take me to get to the growing season of next year, you know, get me through the winter. I don't like to prep that minimal and that close to the edge, but, you know, we're dealing with reality and tight budgets here. So that's how we prioritize. You know, that's, nobody can decide for you what your priorities are. But do we have permapastures in the house? All right. Probability behind the name there. T Black, been getting prepared for this time since 2013 also. Northeast Tennessee, awesome. We'll hope to see you down here or see you at the festival or something. Looking forward to meeting a lot of Tennessee people at that festival as well as people from elsewhere. We have people come from New England and just all over the map, Alabama. Of course, the Carolinas, probably both Carolinas. That's where Billy will be coming from. T-Plax has got my peas planted last week, already coming up. Very nice. I got some peas planted last week too. I have not seen them yet, but they're probably not far away. But so far of our winter crops, we've got radishes coming up.
Yeah, some lettuce.
Lettuce. It's like the speckled lettuce. Turnips.
Maybe some turnips.
The turnips are coming up. The carrots are going slow like they always do. I'm getting pretty disenchanted with carrots. I just don't think they're the right crop for this region. They're so slow, and we just have so little luck with them. But I'm not quite ready to throw in the towel yet. But there's other root crops that are so much easier to grow. It's just that they're kind of sweet as opposed to like the taste of turnips, which are so overpowering. Yeah. But we've got all of those crops coming up, and we still have a lot of our summer crops. We've got eggplant, peppers, tomatoes, all of the usual summer culprits there. But I love winter crops. Like my favorite is spring and fall because like you have way less bug problems. Like those are my favorite times to garden. Really around here we basically have 3 seasons. You have it's not that cut and dry, but essentially you have all of your cold weather crops, all the root crops and all the greens and kale, things like that. Then you have all the traditional summer crops, tomatoes, watermelons, those kinds of things. And then you have that last third planting you can do of turnips and things that like can take a frost. Turnips can take a lot of frost. A lot of kales can take a lot of frost. And most places in North America are like that. You can get 3 good growing seasons. We don't really think of things in seasons necessarily because we plant all year long. I'm trying to get to the point where I plant every day. But roughly there's like those kind of designations of cold weather and hot weather crops. Reliance and Trust says, if anyone needs a tracker or a hunter to shoot a deer, hand me a rifle. We actually are working on a hunting property we're very excited about. Let's just go ahead and talk about it. We've got time. So this is part of our prepping. Let's talk about bug out properties. We just acquired a bug out property. And we really like to stack functions here around here. We believe in stacking functions, killing as many birds with one stone as you can. And we can't justify just buying a piece of property in case of a future scenario. It has to be an asset. If I spend significant money on a piece of property, it has to be an asset for us.
Investment back quickly.
And it also has to be, if it's something we're going to keep around and not just flip, then it needs to be a lifestyle for us as well. We need to get food from the site or timber or recreation. So it has to be a very, very practical site. And we actually just found that site I just closed on that about a week ago.
Yeah,
a couple weeks ago. And it's a 1 acre, almost exactly 1 acre wooded site near the Tennessee River with water on the site. And it's basically a cabin site that's not really good for building a full-blown house or a farm or anything like that. But it's old growth timber, beautiful, down deep in a hollow, and it's just a perfect bug out property. But it also backs up to TVA land and a lot of public hunting land. So right away, that asset is clear to us what we need to do to make that an asset pay for itself, which is we're going to build cabins and have a hunting property. And there's access to the Tennessee River right there. So we're going to market to hunters, fishermen, and we're also going to do foraging classes and take part of the the finding country business that we're building. We're going to make that a part of it as well. And when we have things like the Back to the Land Festival, we'll have an Airbnb there that people can stay in and camp, maybe an RV site too.
Also, today we realized we could make it not just a food forest, but also like a source of cuttings that we could then sell.
Because it's a great place for growing pawpaws because of the spring there. And there's already a ton of hickories growing, so we already have great food sources, as well as hundreds of thousands of acres behind it of public land with deer and fish and all sorts of game. But that's another way to think of prepping is like we're trying to get out of cash. So we're moving, not that we have piles of it, but every bit of cash that we can acquire, and this is why I'm working 12, 16-hour days, every bit of capital I can acquire right now, I'm quickly getting rid of. I'm putting it into hard assets that will generate value even in a collapse scenario. And so cheap rural real estate, if you can afford anything like that, and you can, because there are rural lots for $500. You can go to Arkansas and get an RV lot near a lake for $500 to maybe $1,500 at the most. Anybody can save that money. A homeless person could work for a carnival. One time when I was a kid, I went and worked for a carnival. There was no background check. There was no nothing. I walked up to, worked as a carny for a weekend, made cash money, and I would have had enough to buy property. It wouldn't matter who I was. I could have been on drugs, anything. I could have been like anybody can still buy land right now.
Scared. Think about them creating your rides. But.
Yeah. Don't ride carnival rides ever.
The moral of the story.
Point being, though, that anybody can buy land, so get money into these assets now. And so this is also like we can't buy there's a lot of lots we really want for like farm stands or just farms, out here, but we don't have the budget for that. So we have to figure out this one we bought is like a half hour to 45 minutes away from us. So we had to figure out like how can we make this a business and an asset when it's far away. But we figured out a way to make that work so that we can still put our money into that hard asset. But another way of prepping and getting rid of that fiat and putting it into assets that produce value and money is greenhouses. We're going to invest in a high tunnel really soon, as well as smaller greenhouses in various parts of the property. Yeah. I pretty much believe in building a greenhouse on the south side of every outbuilding. Infrastructure for the farm, we're pouring a lot of money into that. So drip irrigation. And when I say a lot of money, I mean $50 here, $100 there. That's a lot of money for us. But we think of a $20 bill. That's something to be invested, just like, $100,000 or something like that. Like we try to think as an investor, regardless of how much or how little money that is. Because every dollar that comes through that we don't have to spend on things that disappear like food, we pour quickly into assets and try to get those assets generating money. So anybody can buy assets. You don't have to be a millionaire to get assets. And the more assets you buy that produce money or capital relatively passively, the more wealthy you're going to be because you don't have to work those things all the time. So a greenhouse, when you get a good like humidity sensor in there and you've got maybe some gravity fed water, good clean water going into it, if you can design that, even a very small one, you've suddenly got a much more hands-off system that takes a lot less time than a manually watered one. And you can grow a tremendous quantity of capital in terms of nursery plants, seedlings, or if you have high tunnels, things like greens and high value crops. And like you can we bought one greenhouse, it was $300, I think, for the whole kit. And I've seen I haven't built that one yet. It's still in the box, but I've seen other people who built them and they run businesses out of them. Cindy Stone might be on here right now. She's a friend of ours out here who does a phenomenal job of growing heirloom tomato seedlings and pepper seedlings for the most part. And she works out of, I think it's like a 8x12 greenhouse. It's just a kit she got from Walmart or something. And she's running a really good amount of production out of that. And she has a roadside stand to sell it and everything. And, that's an asset that did not take a lot of money to acquire and is just over year after year producing capital as well as food.
A lot of comments in
Home and Garden Diary says, can you recommend a generator? I cannot. I can't. I have not bought a generator. However, we've decided not to invest in generators because then we're just having to stock fuel. Otherwise, it's just as useless to us in an emergency. If you're living in a city, of course, that might make more sense for just getting through short-term emergencies. But we would much rather pour our money into solar and like things that endlessly produce energy, and then right away start like if we're gonna put in money into a generator, which is like, I don't know, $300-400 probably. We might as well just do solar panels, and then we can start using that energy right away. So now we've purchased an asset. It's not just a prep; it's an asset. This whole community hour today should have been calling prepping with assets. But see, that's how you can prep on a budget, is because it's hard for us to justify buying a bunch of food that might go to waste, or buying a bunch of hand tools that we may never use, or bug out property, or survival gear. Instead, if we invest in things that are going to produce value, we can justify spending like all of our money on prepping. Our whole lifestyle is prepping. We built a house. We're building a farm, and we're moving our businesses and away from our jobs and getting rid of those jobs and moving more towards self-employment. All of this is really prepping, because we see where the world is going and we believe we're in collapse, and we're exiting the system as quickly as we can. And man, I want to sell this idea to everybody that considers themselves a prepper, because it makes you wealthy. Like we still think of ourselves as poor, but we're truly building wealth, as a young couple and as a millennial couple. That's really hard. We didn't have our college paid for. We don't have trust funds. We don't I've been low income my entire life. I've never had health insurance in my life. Gabby's been like middle income. And you didn't have anything paid for. Your college was, well, she was smart, so she got all scholarships. I had to go in point being, like anybody, if you prep in this way, it'll make you wealthy. And I really believe that if we keep building slow and steady and build things well and just are careful with every penny, we're going to keep building wealth. We're going to keep building assets, greenhouses, business fronts, farm stands, rental units, Airbnbs. There are so, like, think about how accessible an Airbnb is. That could be a camper or a tree house or a really cool, something that you build in whatever way you like to build, or a natural building method that may skirt a lot of building codes, that is still going to generate a lot of money. And you can actually rent out Airbnbs like permanently. You can blur that line. If you find somebody who wants to live in a small cabin and you develop a relationship with them, regardless of what the rental laws are in your municipality, whatever, you can just kind of ignore that and skirt the system. Just make sure you're mitigating whatever troubles come out. Like if you have to deal with eviction, you may not have the benefit of the legal system there. But my mom does that on 5 acres in Oregon. She does Airbnb, but that's turned into regular renters who just rent out rooms in her basement. She's turned that into a full-time business and done really well. And she's actually moved almost entirely now to renters instead of Airbnb. But she started off Airbnb and slowly graduated into that, because she also feeds them, and she runs almost a traditional boarding house. She's like the world's biggest empty nester. When all of us kids moved out, she just needed people to take care of and cook for her. So that fits her lifestyle really well. But that's such an accessible thing in Airbnb. Like, she was renting out just camper sites. They just random one power pole. All of these things are so accessible to anybody who can just work and save money. You can just not spend all your money on frivolous things. I really think we're proving something here, because I live off so little as a musician, and even before we were together and combining our efforts, I was still building assets and buying really cheap real estate. And that brought me out of poverty really for the first time in my life. I still feel like we're still like crawling out of this, but I got my debt paid off. I got hard assets. I got equity. I got things that produce me food and health.
Yeah.
That's hard to compare to. So this kind of went on a rabbit trail, but I think it's an important point about prepping, which prepping can be homesteading, and it can also be building wealth. Prepping can be a business and a lifestyle.
It doesn't have to be like a detraction from your life, or like an obligation. Yeah.
All right, I need to catch up on comments. We have so many great comments in here, and I'm missing them all. Hearing myself talk. There's no toilet paper or paper towels at Sam's Club, but they have a full pallet of 50-pound bags of rice for $17. What are people thinking? That's Permapastor's Farm. That's Billy over there. That is crazy. Yeah, now I would say both should be empty probably, because I definitely one thing I'm going to prep up on is toilet paper. I'm not giving up that luxury. No way. I'm going to kill for toilet paper. I'll be there, in my Mad Max up armored minivan chasing down toilet paper. But that's good. So that's good to hear the reports on the ground. So that would be North Carolina. And in fact, we should talk about the food shortages that we ran into today. If you all just let me know what you're seeing on the ground, we can kind of build a picture more accurately of what's happening. We just talked to a clerk at the Dollar General. I'm always trying to rack their brain. And she says they have 2 semi trucks that they can't find. They literally don't know where these semi trucks were supposed to arrive with food and other basic goods to put in the Dollar General, and they just don't know where they are. They're just lost in the bureaucracy, lost in the labor shortages and the lockdowns and the collapsing supply chains, all of it. Like, they just totally lost these trucks, and they're sitting there like, where's our merchandise?
Yeah,
we just saw that in real life. That's more than just a shortage. It's that, to me, implies collapse when businesses like Dollar General don't know where their stuff is, and they're trying to call corporate and figure it out. Like, that doesn't look good. And those shelves were looking mighty bare. I don't think we're going to see instantaneous famine here in America. Our system is still so diverse. I could be wrong. At any, an EMP would change that in a second. But if things continue on their current trajectory, I think we're going to see skyrocketing prices on food. And I think that should also color our response and our prepping more realistically. Let's think about the long term, which is that it's just not sustainable to buy food anymore. We need to be growing our food, all of it. We need land, we need homesteads. People need to get whatever land they can get as fast as they can. And that includes just getting access to land. Even if you can't own it, you can partner with people, you can guerrilla garden, you can...
And also from a health perspective, like, canned food is... Usually there is a lot of salt added.
Sodium and other stuff. You never know what the sugars and corn syrups and GMOs and transhumans.
So that's another thing to just be mindful of.
Yeah. And that's like, there's so much in just anything that you're going to purchase from the store. It's just not safe. You just don't know what's in there, except that there's a lot of bad things in there. And it's getting harder and harder to find nutritive food. Like, we have to chase down peanut butter.
Yeah.
Actual peanut butter that's just peanuts. It's almost impossible to find. Like, I've gone to Walmart and literally, out of all of the selections of peanut butters, there are times when I've gone to Walmart and not been able to find peanut butter that only consisted of peanuts.
Yeah.
They're full of corn syrup and soy lectin and just all these other garbage additives. It's like, how hard is it to just give me peanuts? But real food is getting harder and harder to come by in the stores. And that's kind of what we are prepping on, is like, when I find some beans that don't have any salt added, I buy a whole cardboard carton of those. When I find peanut butter that's real, like when we get to Kroger, they have a good one. They have a store brand that's still pretty cheap. We get a whole crate.
I did find one at Walmart the other day.
That's cool. But it's getting harder and harder. So that's like, I think it's just wiser for us to transition out of the system now. Now is the time to do it. There's so many reasons to, like, every single one of us watching should be striving for full-time food production, like producing food for ourselves and enough to sell. We should all be farmers or farmsteaders, where we're mainly focused on producing for ourselves first, but trying to get to a point where we have so much surplus we can sell food. And I would also add the caveat from a permaculture's perspective: if you're selling food off your land, you're taking fertility off your land, so you need to be bringing it back on if you're going to do that. And that could be in a number of ways. But we can't extract from the land the way we've been doing. So if you're taking food off the land, you're selling vegetables, you're selling meat, then you need to be bringing wood chips onto the land, or food scraps, or manures, or something from the outside world back onto your farm. And that's an opportunity, because we can solve waste stream problems and keep that from becoming waste. And we can channel that into composting and rebuilding soil. And sometimes you can even make money on it. You can make money taking people's food scraps. You can make money taking landscape, grass clippings or leaves or something away from people. Like, you could find ways to actually monetize getting the food scraps or the organic material, and then you turn that into compost, which becomes fertility and which becomes food, which can become capital. Craze Family Homestead says, I love that name. I like to cover my carrots with cardboard for a few days instead of dirt until they germinate. I've heard that, and I forgot about that. Let's try that with this next batch. Maybe we'll try planting a few of those today. Reliance on Trust says, I may be finding myself moving about soon. The Father's placing me in positions I can't comprehend, and I'm releasing the fear and doubt. Without thinking, I shall find more neighbors to serve. Well, you're always welcome out here in Tennessee. I know you live over there in Oregon, and Oregon is paradise. Truly, for all its problems, Oregon is Narnia. It's the most beautiful place on earth, and I miss it every day. But Tennessee is a very beautiful place, too. There's just more ticks, but you can mitigate the ticks. You can design your property. We're designing ticks off of our property. We're designing the mosquitoes away. You can live in conjunction with nature out here really well. And Tennessee is a very free place. They're having a lot of problems taking over Tennessee. It's a free place. It's full of self-sufficient people. It's still relatively affordable, especially Middle Tennessee. Lax building codes, small lots, healthy, thriving cities compared to others, like maybe not Memphis, but Nashville appears like it's going to continue to thrive, even in lockdowns and collapse. But there's also not that many powerful cities like that, and the population here is more balanced. Because I'm from Oregon, so I know that Portland has all the power there, and everything else is like a vassal state to that central city. Tennessee is not so much like that. The rural areas are full of people out here, so it's harder to just have a single blue city that controls everything. And Tennessee is well situated. It's of course becoming more blue everywhere is, but other than places like Arkansas and stuff like that, where you virtually have no real cities in the same way. You don't have those centers of blueness of left-leaning thought. But you're losing like the economic power of them there too. So I really feel like Tennessee is a good place where, as long as we can access some kind of jobs and stuff, there's jobs to be had from the proximity of the cities like Nashville, and there's money to be had as far as like selling produce at a premium, because Tennessee is going to keep being full of rich people. It's a media center, which means propaganda center. So even in a fascist takeover, there's going to be money flowing through the entertainment industry there. There's healthcare is a major employer. And so there's not going to, like, healthcare is not going to go away. They're becoming more powerful by the day. So there's lots of rich doctors and just kind of upper income registered nurses and stuff like that. Like a lot of folks with a lot of money. There's more mansions in Nashville than I've ever seen. Yeah, hospital admin. So there's a lot of jobs, and I'm not saying that you would want those jobs, but some of those people are probably going to want nutritive food. And there's so much opportunity for like having CSAs and delivery systems, or places where they come out and pick up food, because here we're in a very, very rural area, and we are less than 1 hour from downtown Nashville, just under. But it's like far removed from development, and it's far removed culturally from accepting what they accept in the city. Like people out here will not tolerate tyranny. There's no lockdowns, and there's none of that stuff. And there never will be. People will stand up here. I really believe that. And we know a lot of people who speak that way and who really back it with action. There's some churches, and there are businesses and families out here who are pretty powerful. They're successful. They run nonprofits. They run businesses. They run, in some cases, armies and manufacturing companies, and they're very liberty minded. So if you're thinking about moving, and you're obviously pretty much everyone on this channel is like-minded, I would encourage you to look at Middle Tennessee. There's still more land to be had out here. It's not as cheap as it was, but like, for example, Benton County, where I got that lot, there's a lot more of those cheap river lots. I may actually try to buy some of them, redesign them, like do a permaculture design on them, and actually sell them. Because I think it's such a good opportunity. I think this region it's becoming a hot commodity really quickly. So places I like in Tennessee are Benton County, no building codes, no composting toilets. Same with Perry County. By the way, every single one of these counties is rich in water, in timber, and there's not a lot of big ag, so there's not tons of poisons in the waterways. So it's not like the lower part of Tennessee and the Delta. Benton County, Perry County, Lewis County, Wayne County is a good one. More in Hickman County. There is building codes in Hickman County, but I mean, if you want to come here and build a house without building codes, I will be there protecting your ability to do so. So you have at least one ally that will show up and make it so you don't have to do building codes, and we're going to try to remove them in this county. But they are very lax, and they're very hands off. They're not bureaucratic yet, and we're going to work to make sure that doesn't get any worse. And people still do like tiny houses, and they really skirt the laws a lot still. You can still get away with it if you're kind of discreet. But if you're planning on building a stick-built house like this anyway, you have to do the building codes, build it to code if you're going to get bank financing to sell it. So if you want a house that can like be sold traditionally, you're going to want to build a stick-built or a double-wide manufactured home anyway. So if that's your plan and you have the budget for that, Hickman County is a really good option too. Because it's very rural, very independent-minded, but it's got really good proximity to, if you want to like farm and really sell to people in the city who have high budgets, it's great for that. We can drive to Franklin, which is full of, upper middle class and upper class people. Brentwood, same thing. We don't have to go through the city center. So if there was ever, collapse happening in city centers, we really drive rural roads to the back ends of these cities to do like CSA drop-offs or anything like that. So I think even if things enter into a crazy state of collapse, short of total zombie apocalypse or EMP or something, these kind of counties are really well situated to sell food, to sell sheds, woodworking, to kind of like look at what the Amish are doing and how successful they've been and imitate that to some degree. That's the ultimate prep.
Got a lot of
yeah, let's check through these comments here before we, and then we're probably already coming up on an hour. I told you this would happen. We would have too much fun. We're talking about wrapping up early today, and we just have too much fun with these conversations. It's so much fun. Let's see. No TV says it's Hudson. Reliance on Trust says perhaps a generator that runs on a bicycle chain. Yeah, let's talk about more energy options really quick. I've been really partial lately to small self-contained solar options. So like I just bought a little Harbor Freight solar panel that charges the phone. That's all it does. But I'll use that, because I can also charge flashlights with that. I found USB flashlights. So little resilient systems like that, there's security lights that are pretty good that are solar powered and they're self-contained. I'm not dealing with inverters and banks of batteries and all that stuff. So I'm kind of trying to design a system where I just have lots of little independent, cheap solar systems to meet all of our lighting needs and our computer needs. But the rest of it can be designed out, especially if you're building your home. We're going to be building a screened-in porch that we can sleep on at night. And it's high up off the ground. It's very secure, but we can just have a breeze moving through. And Tennessee gets pretty cool at night, even in the dead of summer. And we'll have wood heat. And we'll have wood heat options. We'll have outdoor cooking options. We'll have options to cook over the stove in the winter. So basically, by designing our life and our building and our homestead to not need electricity, we're going to just mitigate all these. So I don't think the answer is, for most people, budget-wise, is to get a huge solar bank or something like that. I think it's just to look at what you really need electricity for, which is, honestly, the biggest drain is a refrigerator. And that's refrigerator and laundry machine. But you can do off-grid laundry. There's plenty of very efficient methods of doing that. We're going to explore that. And we've done off-grid laundry for a long time, as well as just using the laundromat. But you can mitigate that power drain. But the refrigerator one is hard unless you're moving entirely into a root cellar system. We may eventually get there. But for right now, the convenience of refrigeration is too valuable for us. But we do have electricity. This is not an off-grid property entirely. So for me, I kind of see the things like refrigerators as a temporary thing for the next 5 to 10 years. But then when we build our final homestead, we'll probably just design that out. And we'll just design our cheeses and our meat preservation, all this, to not necessarily need refrigeration. I really think we can do that over the course of a few years. So not every piece of technology needs to be there permanently or accounted for in your system. But I have seen a guy, we were just talking about this today, who powered a small generator on a bicycle, on a stationary bike. He was an old mountain guy I knew up in Oregon, basically a mountain man that managed his family's timber lots. They had large tracts of land in the Tillamook Forest and up in Canada as well. They were, I think, French-Canadian. And he would spend the summers in Canada and winters out in Oregon, and would just do all of the management of their logging operations, all of that. But he just lived in the tiniest camper I'd ever seen, and he just had that little stationary bike to like power his coffee maker and stuff. It was a pretty fun setup, and that was kind of my first exposure to true off-grid living. And he was very off-grid. He had like,
you said he had pet bears.
Yeah, he had bears and deer that would just come up, and he was like Grizzly Adams. It was a great guy. But so I have seen a case of that working. So that is possible, a stationary bike that powers some kind of generator. Of course, you do get exercise out of it, but that is a lot of work for probably a pretty small yield of electricity. We've also looked at, of course, hydropower. If you can get any kind of spring and then you have enough of a drop, you can turn a wheel, you can make hydropower, and that could potentially come at a time when there's not much sun, depending on your climate. So that could be good to balance out a solar system. But so far, all of our solar systems are kind of separate and self-contained. We've got the one for the USB. We've got a separate solar power and small inverter with just a normal outlet.
We have like solar lights.
Solar lights, yeah.
Outside, like house lights.
But other than the refrigerator and lighting, I don't think there's a lot you need electricity for. And devices, of course, phones. But like, we don't have a TV in here. We just use our
internet.
Actually, here, let's see. Do you have your phone?
Yes.
So we have our TV. And then we have our big screen TV. And that's all we use. And our laptops that we use, of course. And potentially you could design that out if you're charging your phone in your car every day, if you're still going to work, or if you're working in an office and you use your laptop there, or at a coffee shop or library. But there's really just, you can design the need for electricity, and I think that's a much more sustainable solution than solar panels, which still rely on a product that will break, that you'll have to replace. You're still dependent on the industrial system. So, solar panels are a great tool for us to use right now, but they may not always be an option in the future. They have a lifespan. But I would encourage just looking at the little Harbor, just to start experimenting with solar. Buy a little $200 panel at Harbor Freight, or you can buy the mobile phone ones for hiking. Those are really fun. And just think about it, those are incredible preps that can also, if you buy a solar thing, you should find something to charge right away with it, because you're getting free electricity indefinitely until that device breaks, really. So if you don't use it right away as an asset, and actually solar can be an asset. I know Curtis Stone talked about this. He's got such an extensive rich guy system. Mm-hmm. He's been blessed with his company. He's done well, so he gets to build this off-grid paradise, and he's very experienced in it, so he's doing a really good job of it. But they have so much solar that they have an excess of energy at times, and so they're powering like Bitcoin mining with that, and so they're turning that extra electricity in the heat of summer into capital. And so that's such a good way to think of prepping. Once again, don't just buy something to prep, buy assets. I just about won't buy anything unless it's an asset, except for like ice cream occasionally. Freedom Inc. says 2 truck drivers preparing quick like. Truck drivers are great folks to talk to too, because they're also witnesses of this collapse and how bad supply chains are doing. Home and Garden Diary says, used to rent every bedroom to students in my old home, helped pay mortgage when I lost my job. Yeah, a lot of people, they're queasy about the idea of bringing strangers into their home, but it could mean the difference between not paying your mortgage and paying your mortgage. And a lot of people are going to be in that position real soon, and there is going to be a lot of opportunity.
Yeah,
there.
It would definitely be like a last resort for me.
But again, it could be a shed on your land too, which can be like for the price of a room. Maybe it's way cheaper than anything else in your area, but it has less amenities. Privacy. I have a friend in Nashville that built a tiny house, and they did it illegally and just said, F it. And they did it illegally, and they got away with it. And if they got caught with it, they're musicians, so they can turn it into a music studio or just storage. It's just a shed. They've already gotten their money out of it. So a lot of times you look at the investment return on like putting an Airbnb shed and building it, turning it into a building project. And you look at it, and it's like that investment could pay, not only be in the black, but pay itself back in a year's time. What other investment does that?
Yeah.
That's like 100% return. That's, what's the S&P average, like 12%? It's so much better than that. And these hard assets are so much better than traditional investments. I have no interest in the stock market. If I purchase shares of a company, it's going to be people that I know who are starting.
And that you can like directly.
Yeah. Because every investment I've ever made has been for, let's see. I would say if the S&P is, I think it's the average return of the S&P is 12.5%, and that's over a long period of time. So that's really truly the yearly average of a pretty good investment. We've always gotten 7 or 8 times that rate just by investing in hard assets, properties, fixer-uppers. And I think we're going to continue at that rate when we look at the price of greenhouses and high tunnels and what we can make as far as the products we sell out of them. So our prepping and our prepping is our food production, but our food production is our business too. And so really, I would just sum it up saying prepping can make you wealthy. I really think so. And I think anybody that thinks that way is on a track to do really well for themselves. Homestead Aquarius says, we are heading into some rough years and it will pick up the pace soon, I'm afraid. Yeah, it's been slower than I expected, but it seems to just be moving. But it's almost like kind of like in waves too. You'll have a few weeks without anything too crazy, and then like something else happens that's really crazy. But it certainly seems like the collapse is going to be exponential as people get more desperate, hungry, angry, disenfranchised, and as the propaganda which is designed to divide us continues. When you literally have a president saying, saying we have to protect the vaccinated from the unvaccinated. When you have things like that going on, of course the hatred and the violence is going to increase. And I do think it's going to move faster and faster. And that's why we're just working at such a breakneck pace. Buy rice. In Vietnam, families buy your supply of rice in January. This year, some families bought 2 to 3 years supply. Vietnam is not exporting rice and keeping it for themselves. I'm seeing that all across the board. Christian Westbrook does great content on this and about tracking which countries have stopped exporting. I believe Brazil stopped exporting soybeans, and they're like the biggest exporter. All over the place, countries are stopping exporting their grains and their goods. Like, it is no longer deniable. Food supply collapse is occurring. I just don't see that you could make any case that it's not. It's here. It's happening. It's probably not going to be overnight, but it could. But I do think it's going to be shelves getting barer and more expensive. I think you'll see a lot of shelves lined up with the same product. That's what you always see in like communist nations and stuff, which is what we are. Yeah, grow food, everybody. Grow food, buy the assets, buy the water catchment systems, design water catchment systems. We're going to track all of this on this channel too. We're about to start a whole lot of projects, including rainwater collection with 55-gallon barrels that we buy for $5 each. So really accessible solutions is what we're going to be covering on the channel. Irrigation, hand tools, scythes, things like that, where you can harvest a lot of grass for rabbits. Cages, wire, lots of fencing. Wire and fencing can be assets. Sheds, storage, more water storage. Guns are good. I'm not talking about guns for like anything, but as an asset, you buy the right gun, it's going to go up in value. Like, I really like older guns for that. But they're also practical to have around, especially right now with ammo shortages. Having some obscure cartridges and stuff like that can be really good. A good excuse to buy like an antique gun or something.
Some chickens.
We have chickens escaping outside. They've joined our neighbor chicken who comes to hang out at our property sometimes.
And now they're flying over the.
And probably Holly, our dog, is chasing them all.
Yeah, she was. That's what I was laughing at.
Holly is very good with the chickens, but she does like to chase them. But in her mind, she's just playing with them, of course. But fortunately, she doesn't harm them. She's got a good livestock guardian genetics in there. Well, all right, let's get through a couple more comments and get out of here, Gabby. Reliance Trust says, an idea I have considered: invite people to bring mulch compost as payment for produce. I know people have done that very successfully. They send buckets, 5-gallon buckets to people, and then they trade them eggs. And they just do it with neighbors. They develop relationships with their neighbors, and they get lots of free compost, and they get to like teach people how to do it as well. Something I'm going to be attempting, and I'll cover this on the channel as well, is I'm going to actually reach out to all of my local landscapers in the area. And I'm going to tell them that I'll actually pay money. I'm not just going to say for free. I'm going to actually pay them $10 to $20 for like a cubic yard, a pickup truckload of pretty much any organic material that's not sprayed with pesticides. So if they're dealing with grass clippings, leaves that owners want removed, pine needles, wood chips, sticks, branches, anything or sawdust, I'm going to reach out to them, local sawmills, and I'm actually going to go ahead and try to use fiat currency to purchase these things and develop long-term relationships to where, because when I worked for a contract or an excavator during the initial lockdowns, and every single day virtually he had a big pile of some kind of organic matter. He had a friend's property he just dumped it off at where they were building up some land in a swamp. If you can tap into somebody like that and develop a relationship with them, it could be just an endless supply. And that appeals to me more, using a little bit of fiat instead of chasing food scraps. If I come across a great source of like organic food scraps, yes, I'll definitely take it. But if there are ways where I can have people bring it to me, and just not spend all those hours going out and bringing things in, as long as it's at a price that's reasonable, I think that'd be a little bit more efficient, because our farm will be producing fiat currency, so we can just trade that to them. And if things got harder, well, that's then you would just find different ways. But like if we are working with small lots, especially, we have to be acquiring organic matter somehow, and there's a billion ways to do that. So I'm just starting to explore that and trying to bring some onto the site, because every piece of wood, every little bit of hay or straw or grass clipping or leaf that you set on your land that didn't come from there, that's another piece of soil and soil life that's going to grow as much food as it can produce. That's a piece of carrot. Whenever I see a wood chip, I try to see the food value in that, or the fiber value, or what's this going to decompose and become. And so when you stock organic, when you find a cheap source of any organic matter, and you start filling your land with it, and your compost piles with it, you're truly just acquiring capital that will enrich that land permanently if you're building a proper system. Alliance and Trust says, Tennessee sounds beautiful. Glad to hear the good news about the climate there. Sounds promising. California is moving a lot of big corporations to the Nashville area. I've seen so much of that That's what's crazy. Is like even in the midst of collapse, Nashville is exploding, and I think it's going to continue to do so. They're definitely an NWO city. They toe the Agenda 21 agenda pretty well, but also the business interests are pretty powerful, and there's some pushback, not enough. So I don't think that city is going to be any bastion of liberty, certainly, but it's not going to be like Portland or LA. It's a little harder for them to move in those cities. Certainly nothing as bad as New York or Chicago. And as soon as you get into the rural areas, the mindset changes drastically. Mm-hmm. Your freedom is an illusion has entered the chat. Good to see you in here. That's good advice with grass clippings. You can grow potatoes and grass clippings. And you usually have to water or weed them. Mm-hmm. And great compost piles. They get a compost pile hot, moving fast. There's a lot of nitrogen in there. Grass clippings like really great in compost, and they're small, so they're going to break down really quickly. Reliance on Trust says, always wanted to visit Knoxville. The music history is fascinating. Knoxville is a fun city. I love Knoxville. Yeah, I kind of wish Nashville was more in Knoxville. I almost moved there because of the connection of bluegrass music and because the Appalachians are so beautiful. Yeah, great city out there. I know some great folks in East Tennessee. Just about a good. Stephanie Crumley says, I've lived my entire life in Southeast Tennessee. Absolutely love the place. Just wish I had a bunch of folks like y'all and others I know on YouTube living near me in real life. That's what we're all trying to build. But if we all do that, if we actively try to do that, like I'm eyeballing the properties around me. When I can build up the budget and I really work on building wealth, I'm going to first buy those properties around me when they come up for sale, because inevitably they do, and fill them with like-minded people. So it'll be an investment, but I also can bring like-minded people into the community. Kind of, since I don't have the option of a giant piece of land to work with right now, I can instead try to build this community as best I can around me, in a less controlled manner by just acquiring small properties. And so far this is our third property in this area, and each person we've sold our previous ones to was a great person and an asset to the community. Lots of good places all over Tennessee, from Nashville east anyway. Yeah, the east side of the state is good, but don't write off Middle Tennessee, because the Appalachians got filled up pretty quickly with people from New York and everywhere, because like it's real desirable, and a lot of people I think have gone on vacation out there, so they snapped up all the cheap property. Whereas Middle Tennessee's been a little bit behind in that, but it has all of the advantages. It's got the hilly terrain. It's basically the foothills of the Appalachians. So East Tennessee and Middle Tennessee, I love them both. Plastos is also in East Tennessee. Man, we got some Tennessee folks in here. This is great. And I hope shoot me a message if you live nearby. Even if you can't make the festival, we do want to connect with everybody nearby that we can, and really build this homesteading network out here too. Homestead Aquarius says, you're right, designing a life to need as little power as possible is a great start. Then many small systems can be used to take care of your needs. Yeah, I like that instead of a big solar bank, because it's diverse. One thing can break and it doesn't break the rest of your system down. Mary says, getting my boys off electronics is a challenge because of the disabilities, but a necessity. I'm assigning various jobs around the garden and animals. It's looking promising. Very good for you. Like smartphones and everything have reached so deep into our minds that we are actually discussing how we can continue to build this media production company, Finding Country and Sovereign Village Project and all the various channels and music things we do, how we can build it all without smartphones. We just want to get those devices away from us at this point.
Yeah.
Batteries are a must, says Mary. Yep, that's another thing. Just every time at the store, I just bite the bullet. I don't think about what it costs. I just buy another pack of AA batteries. I'm just buying AA and AAAs, and then I'm trying to only buy flashlights and things that use those same batteries. So that way I can have more batteries for fewer devices, basically. Ben Savage says, I'm in West Virginia now, saving money and enjoying Amish farm food. West Virginia. If I was not in Tennessee, I would be in West Virginia. What a beautiful place. All right, y'all. Sorry if I missed any comments. This was such a wonderful chat, and there's so much going on. And my favorite thing is when the chat is partially like directed at what we're saying, but then you also see side conversation where people are like just discussing problems. And Reliance on Trust, I always appreciate you answering a lot of questions. He's very knowledgeable, very good channel. And he's often answering questions in there, which is great. And it's fun to see all those sidebar conversations. I would encourage everybody, find ways, as we chat with everyone here on YouTube, find ways to reach out to people and try to meet everybody. I know you're not supposed to meet strangers from the internet, but every time I've met somebody from this channel, it's been a wonderful experience.
You met me on the internet.
I did meet Gabby off the internet too, yeah. Yep, it's a numbers game, So, yeah. So I would personally, I would encourage that is like reach out to people, meet them in person, bring some seedlings to meet somebody and some seeds and trade seeds and seedlings and see what other people are doing on their homesteads, invite them to your homesteads. Like, I think the answer to everything is more openness, more giving, more gifting, more connections, more community, knowledge. More sharing of everything, knowledge, materials, tools, seedlings, things like comfrey, or like a lot of plants that are great for permaculture are really sold out. So if you can get one and then you can learn to get root cuttings and give those to people, you can spread food quickly throughout we need to do that. We need to spread food throughout our neighborhoods as fast as we can. So that's why we're getting our perennial production going so fast. We want to take root cuttings and regular cuttings, spread those out, spread seeds, give seeds to our neighbors, get everybody growing, help them start gardens. That's the best, most ultimate prep is a well-fed community, a happy community, a connected community. All right, y'all. Thank you so much for taking part of this. This has been just a great conversation. Home and Garden Diary says, thanks for a great live. Wish I was in the U.S. to buy land. Hey, you can always come here. The border's wide open down south. Just come across. We'll find a place for you. I don't care much for borders now anyway. They don't do anything. So, if there's any way you can get here, it's going to be a rough ride here in America, I think. But it's I would rather be where it's rough, where people are still fighting for freedom. And it seems like Europe, Asia, South America, some of them are fighting for freedom. The Aussies are starting to fight back. But it seems like most everyone's just rolling over and just letting it happen. And I know at least that's not going to happen in America. And it's going to be a chaotic, horrible time, I think, for a lot of people. It's going to be very rough and violent. But we can build communities of resilience against that and protect ourselves and build safe places, I think, as best we can. And that's what we're trying to build here. So I think if I was in a foreign country right now, I would try to get to America, or at least South America or something. I would not stay in Europe for any reason. It just seems like there's no way you're going to win that. Like, if you live in England, you're on an island. Like, you can't escape. It's going to be really hard. You're completely dependent food-wise. And they have the tentacles so far into farming. It's so hard to farm there. They regulate the heck out of everything. I've talked to farmers in England. Beautiful country. I love it. But it's got a long road ahead of it, just like America. But it looks like there you're going to be suffering under totalitarianism. And over here you're going to be suffering in war. I think that's where I think things are going to go. Just because people aren't going to tolerate it. But we'll see. Maybe they will. But it's not relevant to us. We've got it is, but we're just trying to build insulation from all of these bad things that are happening and build a place where people can thrive and where we can thrive and have a family thrive. So I hope you all are able to build that wherever you're at. In the meantime, stay safe, everybody. Be well and happy homesteading.